My name is Zundamon. In our world, earthquakes occur everywhere, and each time, countries cooperate to achieve reconstruction. Today, I want to share one episode where Japan was assisted in the spirit of mutual aid. Let's get started! On March 11th, 2011, the Great East Japan earthquake struck Japan. At that time, Japan was saved by rescue support from various countries. Among them, have you heard of Operation Tomodachi, which had a significant impact? This was a large-scale disaster relief operation by the United States, involving coordination between the Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marine Corps. The operation's name, derived from the Japanese word for friend, was chosen by Admiral Robert F. Willard, the commander of the U.S. Pacific Command, and was suggested by Paul Wilcox, a retired U.S. Air Force officer who was serving as the Japan Desk Officer at the U.S. Pacific Command's Northeast Asia Policy Division at the time. The magnitude 9.0 earthquake, the largest ever recorded by Japan, was a disaster in itself. However, the subsequent tsunami greatly amplified the damage, devastating the Tohoku region. Japan's recovery from this point was greatly aided by international rescue efforts. Particularly notable was the swift action of its ally, the United States. The very next day, on March 12th, the U.S. initiated Operation Tomodachi, deploying about 24,000 personnel, around 20 ships, and approximately 160 aircraft. They conducted search and rescue for survivors, humanitarian assistance, transportation, and initial responses to the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear disaster. Why was the U.S. able to act so swiftly and effectively? There were two main reasons. The first was swift decision-making. According to insiders, in the meetings immediately following the earthquake, there was no debate about whether to help Japan or whether the disaster fell under the U.S.-Japan Security Treaty. The premise was always to help Japan, and the discussion focused on how to do so. This sentiment was not limited to military personnel. For example, the flagship USS Blue Ridge, which was docked in Singapore at the time, set sail for Japan the day after the earthquake with relief supplies. As former Colonel Davis on board recounted, when the crew heard about the tsunami, they all returned to the ship without needing to be called back. Everyone was ready to go to the rescue immediately. On March 13th, the nuclear-powered aircraft carrier USS Ronald Reagan, far out in the Pacific, was also moved to action. Upon hearing about the disaster, Captain Tom Burke contacted Commander Robert Gilley and said, "We should go to help." Commander Gilley immediately agreed. The Ronald Reagan arrived off the coast of Sendai that day and held coordination meetings with the Japan Self-Defense Forces on board. The official order for the Ronald Reagan to participate in the rescue efforts came the next day. Burke and Gilley's independent decision allowed for swift transportation of supplies, search and rescue of victims, and refueling of Self-Defense Force helicopters. Thus, at the heart of Operation Tomodachi was the spirit of the American military personnel who cared deeply for Japan. Another key to the success of Operation Tomodachi was the presence of a particular individual. Robert D Aldridge, stationed at the Okinawa Marine Corps headquarters at the time, was deployed as a political advisor to the Tohoku region. He had experienced the Great Hanshin Awaji earthquake during his graduate studies at Kobe University and had also engaged in volunteer activities. He knew what priorities should be set in a major disaster in Japan and what was needed. The disaster dispatch plan for Operation Tomodachi was based on his experiences. First, the U.S. military reviewed its command structure. Commander Patrick Walsh stated, "Normally, the military operates in a hierarchical manner, but our role here was to support the self-defense forces. It was important to work with them on an equal footing to accomplish what they needed and requested. Additionally, the U.S. forces were conscious of the cultural differences between Japan and the U.S. For example, they always bowed when meeting disaster victims and related personnel. This custom is not common in American culture. Such genuine attitudes and considerations provided comfort to the Japanese and led to the success of Operation Tomodachi. One of the important projects of Operation Tomodachi was the restoration of Sendai Airport. The condition of Sendai Airport, as encountered by the U.S. military, was dire. However, the airport was a key air gateway, and without its operation, it was impossible to bring in supplies, as land routes were devastated. Restoring the airport was a priority. There was also hope that the sight of the devastated airport being restored would give courage to the Japanese people. With this in mind, the U.S. military deployed a special forces team from the Marines stationed in Okinawa. They brought in heavy machinery and large trucks and worked tirelessly on the restoration of Sendai Airport. As a result, just 5 days after starting, on March 20th, the airport was able to accommodate the landing of transport planes, and by March 31, the restoration was complete. Civilian flights resumed on April 13th, a remarkably rapid achievement. Air Force Colonel Robert Toss, who participated in the airport's restoration, Rektekisuto Dumiange Supichitsu Supichi, hived heartfelt thanks from the disaster victims near the end of his mission on April 3rd. That day, he spotted someone dragging a long piece of wood on the beach near the runway as a U.S. military plane was landing at Sendai Airport. At first, he was curious about what it was, but he was surprised to find a message laid out in the spot, visible only during landing. "Thank you," spelled out with pieces of wood. The people, despite being in dire straits and working hard, took the time to express their gratitude to us. I felt a surge of gratitude towards the Japanese people, Colonel Toss recalled. Moved by the Japanese spirit of gratitude, Commander Walsh also reflected on his visit to an evacuation center at an elementary school after the airport's restoration, where an elderly woman sought a handshake and held his hand for a long time. It was a rewarding moment, a scene I will never forget. And as Operation Tomodachi progressed smoothly, Kevin Marr, who was coordinating with the Japanese government, faced a significant challenge: the nuclear accident. It was later revealed that within the U.S. government, there were discussions about evacuating the 90,000 Americans living in Tokyo. At that time, the results of computer simulations on radiation spread were not yet available. Despite this, there were voices advocating for evacuation in case of the worst scenario. If radiation levels were high, evacuation would be necessary. However, deciding to evacuate before the simulation results could imply that the U.S. was abandoning Japan, potentially damaging the trust and foundation of the U.S.-Japan alliance. Considering this, Maher argued that action should be taken after waiting for the results. This view prevailed in the meetings, and immediate evacuation was postponed. Subsequently, it was confirmed that the radiation levels did not pose a problem, but Japan was limited in what it could do at the time. It's important to be aware that such dilemmas existed on the American side and not overlook the reality that U.S. soldiers participating in Operation Tomodachi also faced difficulties. Operation Tomodachi, which showcased the strong bond between Japan and the U.S., also led to legal issues. Over 400 U.S. servicemen and women, believed to have been exposed to radiation, suffered health problems, and filed a lawsuit against Tokyo Electric Power Company and others. According to their lawyer, some plaintiffs showed symptoms of leukemia and thyroid abnormalities. Eventually, the U.S. Supreme Court dismissed the class action lawsuit. A 2014 U.S. Department of Defense report stated that the estimated radiation exposure for all personnel involved in the operation was very low, significantly below levels causing health issues. Regardless of the lawsuit's outcome, the fact that many service members suffered health problems is concerning. It raises the question of whether their feelings toward Japan might change despite having helped the country. However, there are stories like that of former Lieutenant Steve Simmons, a plaintiff who served on an aircraft carrier used as a maritime base for helicopters. About 6 months after completing his mission, around November, he started experiencing symptoms like high fever and loss of consciousness. His condition worsened, leading to significant weight loss, nerve paralysis in his legs, and eventually the amputation of both legs, resulting in wheelchair dependency. Naturally, he could no longer serve in the Navy and was honorably discharged. When asked the dreaded question of whether he regretted participating in Operation Tomodachi, he immediately answered no. Even if he could go back in time, he would do the same thing. Joining the military means being prepared for such risks. Japan, as an ally, is like a brother to him, and he would do the same in any situation. That's what being a soldier is about. His words are truly reassuring. Japan is recovering from the Great East Japan earthquake. Thanks to such kind and brave U.S. servicemen and women, we should recognize this fact, express our gratitude, and never forget it. This concludes our explanation of Operation Tomodachi. Thank you very much for watching. I really appreciate all the comments and likes on our previous videos. They make me very happy and motivate me to create more content. I look forward to seeing you again. Bye-bye!